All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a pretty famous philosophy on how to get rich. But, and this is the cool part, we're looking at it through a totally unique lens, the Vietnamese translation of the book.
So let's start with a big question. Do you need money to make money? I mean, that's the classic line, isn't it? You gotta have a big pile of cash just to get a seat at the table. But what if that's all wrong? What if the real starting capital has nothing to do with what's in your bank account?
Okay, so here's our guide for today. We're actually working from the Vietnamese edition of How to Get Rich. And this is what makes this so interesting, right? It gives us a fascinating look at how these ideas land in a culture that, really values ambition and a resilient mindset, sometimes even more than starting with a lot of money. So here's the game plan. We're going to break this down into 5 key parts. First, mindset over money. Then, the power of thinking big. After that, we'll get into negotiation as an advantage, how to manage the inevitable failures, and finally, what it all looks like as a lifestyle.
All right, let's jump into our first big idea, mindset over money. This is the foundation, and it completely flips the script on that old belief that you need cash to get started. The book argues that the real asset, the most important thing you have, is something you already possess.
And you can see the difference right here. The common assumption is, okay, I'll wait till I have the capital, I'll wait for the perfect moment. But the philosophy we're looking at says, nope, your mindset, your vision, that's your first asset. It's about acting with that big vision, even when things are uncertain, instead of just waiting for the fog to clear. And this quote just nails it. Money is just a tool, not the root of success. Think about it. According to this book, real success comes from seeing what everyone else walks right past. It's that potential in an old forgotten building or the opportunity in a neighborhood that everyone's given up on. The real wealth isn't the cash you have on hand, it's the ability to look at something and ask, okay, what could this become?
Okay, so that leads us right into our second pillar, the power of thinking big. Now, this is probably the part of the philosophy you've heard about the most, but what's cool is how the source breaks it down in a really practical, down-to-earth way.
The core idea here is surprisingly simple. It takes the same amount of mental energy to think small as it does to think big. So, why not think big? And get this, it's not about ego, it's not about being flashy, it's actually about efficiency. The book frames it as a basic return on investment for your own brainpower. If you're going to put in the work anyway, why would you aim for a tiny reward?
And look, this isn't just some vague, dream big motivational poster. The book lays it out as a clear, disciplined strategy. Step 1, aim high. Don't play small games. But step 2 is where the magic happens. Prepare meticulously. This is the key. Thinking big isn't about being reckless. It's about having that huge vision and then doing all the detailed homework to support it. That way, when you walk into a negotiation, you're not just hoping for the best, you're coming from a position of real strength.
And that brings us perfectly to our third pillar, negotiation. It's the art of the deal, right? But again, the way it's presented here is less about being some kind of slick talker and more about it being a rigorous, almost academic discipline. So here's the secret. According to the book, the negotiation is basically won or lost before you even walk into the room. The advantage doesn't go to the person with the cleverest words or the loudest voice. Nope. It goes to the person who is better prepared, the one who's done the research, who understands the other side, and who knows exactly what cards they hold.
And here's the playbook, right here on the slide. First, know exactly what you want. Be crystal clear. But just as important, understand what the other side is afraid of losing. That's your leverage. Then it's a dance, right? Knowing when to push and when to pull back. And always have a backup plan. That last point is huge. Never, ever negotiate when you have to make a deal. That's desperation. Real power, real wealth comes from always having another option.
All right, let's talk about something a lot of How to Succeed books kind of gloss over, failure. This philosophy is different. It doesn't pretend failure doesn't exist. In fact, it treats it as an expected, predictable part of the game, something you have to actively manage. And this comparison really spells it out. For most people, the goal is avoid failure at all costs. But for a big player, the goal is different. It's manage failure so you can keep playing. The idea is, look, if you're aiming high, you're gonna stumble. Failure is gonna happen. The trick is making sure that when you fall, it doesn't knock you out of the game for good.
And that's the core of it right there. The key isn't to never fail, it's to fail in a way that you can control and bounce back from fast. It's not about being made of steel, it's about being resilient. You structure things so that a loss is just a setback, not a career-ending knockout punch. It's all about your ability to take a hit, learn the lesson, and get back on your feet before your opponent even knows you were down.
Okay, so we're at our final section, and this is where it all comes together. This isn't just a list of business tips you can try out on a Tuesday. The book presents this as a total lifestyle, a complete, all-in approach to life.
And this image kind of sets the tone, doesn't it? The source is brutally honest about this. This path isn't about work-life balance. Forget that. It's about diving headfirst into a high-intensity lifestyle. It's built on competition, on constant pressure, and on being willing to be judged for the big swings you take.
So in the end, wealth itself gets reframed. It's not the goal, it's the byproduct. Money becomes the scoreboard. It's the measure of how far you are willing to push your own ambitions and how well you turn those big ideas into something real.
And that's where the book leaves us. Not with a magic formula, but with a simple, powerful question directed right back at you. It asks you to look in the mirror and decide for yourself, how big are you willing to play in your own life?